Give him another hand. All right. As we bring on, we're going to bring on our two plenary speakers and then have our panel go. Now, to back Cory up, I see he got his back covered. In 1972, there was the National Black Political Convention in Gary. And Percy Ellis Sutton, who was the board president of Manhattan at the time, I was 17, going 18, paid my way to go to Gary, me and my mother. And it was chaired by Mayor Hatcher, who had just been one of the first black mayors elected with the help of Reverend Jackson and others, Congressman Diggs, and Umamu Amir Baraka. And the idea was to have delegates from around the country come and set a black political agenda in 72. I remember that 2 years before that, Reverend Jackson had told us to go to Newark to campaign for Ken Gibson to be mayor, who became the first black mayor. And he said to go to a certain street. There's a place called the Spirit House. And asked for Mahmoud Baraka. And we did. And we got there, I was 16, knocked on the door, brother opened the door, had on a dashiki, had big rope chain around his neck. And I said, we're here to see Mahmoud Baraka. And he did a bargani. I grew up Church of God Christ, I didn't know what that was. So I looked at him, I said, Reverend Jackson, Reverend Johnson, to see Mahmoud Baraka. He said, bargani. So I still had to respond. He looked at me again, he said, bargani, waiting on me to respond. I said, well, hallelujah, let me. So I got to know Mahmoud Baraka from there on. Little did we know, as God would have it, that not only did Ken Gibson win, but now in the town that Mahmoud Baraka helped revolutionize black American politics. His son is now the mayor of Newark, named Baraka. Come on up here, Rob. Come up here and sit with Cory. Give him a hand, Rob Baraka, mayor of Newark. I bring on the former mayor who he succeeded, who's now a candidate for the President of the United States, who still lives in the housing developments in Newark, and who has roared like a lion through the campaign, Senator Cory Booker.
Between Newark and Brooklyn because y'all stole my nets. But I'm happy to let that grudge go when you have great leaders like this. Give it up for Hakeem one more time. I want you to know, I left to become a United States Senator, but I didn't leave my city without incredible leadership. There's a man who was a school teacher in his community. He could have gone anywhere when he graduated from Howard. He started as a school teacher in Newark, became a principal of Central High School, became a city council person, and then he rose to be mayor of the city. I tell you right now, Newark is thriving, Newark is coming back, Newark is telling the country who it is, because Merkley is the mayor. Give it up for him one more time. And let me say this. A lot of folk forget who they are and where they came from. Some people take it for granted now. We got 2 black people running for president of the United States. But you have to understand, I would not be here right now if it wasn't for 2 trailblazers that came before me. The first is Shirley Chisholm, unbought and unbossed. And the second person, I was telling Hakeem, the first person I ever voted for in 1988 when I was 18 years old, was a guy who kept hope alive, and that's Jesse Jackson. I would not be here but for the trailblazers. And let me tell you right now, it is interesting when you have something like this, where you got everybody showing up, not just the core of faith leaders and activists like I see before me, but come on now, there has been at least a dozen or 2 presidential candidates who will all come to New York. And that says something. It doesn't just say something about the power of NAN. It also says something about the head of NAN, who is truly right now the steward of the ongoing movement for civil rights and justice in our country, and that's the Reverend Al Sharpton. So I want to get right into a lot of substance. Al said, Cory, come over and talk to the pastors and ministers and get that preaching out of your system. Because we gotta talk some substance of policy here. Hakeem is extraordinary in his charisma. But when I need to govern and get in the trenches and get legislation to the floor that will make a difference for Newark or Brooklyn, he is my partner in the House. And I want to just, I know there's a lot of media here, and so I just want to get some things correct and be succinct. Now, I live in Newark, New Jersey. I live in Brick City, and this is a city that folks tried to knock out, folks tried to count out, and still people are trying to discount. But I do not forget the people that put me into politics. I was elected, Mildred Crump, Councilwoman, can I get a little help here? I was elected to my first office by the Central Ward of Newark, New Jersey. I am 1998. And I was put into office because we are a community that understands you can't talk about America being a nation of opportunity for all unless it's true for everyone. You cannot have a country, as a great poet said, that there's a dream in this land with its back against the wall. To save the dream for one, we must save the dream for all. Langston Hughes' words are true. And so people look at urban poverty and rural poverty and they think somehow it is just an accident of history. And I've been talking this truth since I began my work, that we are dealing with systematic injustice in our country that was designed by policies, practices, designed by laws that have not only created deep pockets of poverty in our country, but have sustained them for years. Now we need to know and say loudly that poverty is not a moral condition. It's not because someone's lazy or because of some kind of moral crisis amongst people. You come to my neighborhood and see folks who are working full-time jobs and are still below the poverty line. You see, poverty is not a moral condition, but a nation that tolerates poverty at the levels we have it right now is in moral crisis. We have to call out the cause of the crisis that we are in. We know today we have a racial wealth gap that is as high as it's ever been. In fact, the racial wealth gap right now is as high as it's been since I've been alive, and it is growing. But we cannot indulge in a historical amnesia when it comes to understanding that in our history, so many meaningful attempts to create wealth in the black community was met with repression and often even physical violence. Hakeem talked about these themes. We're familiar of the bombing of Black Wall Street in Tulsa. We know the reign of terror that literally stripped business people and judges out of their homes to beat them and often murder them in the streets. That Reconstruction period and the backlash that Hakeem talked about, the legacy of that, we're seeing it now. Some of the most important and ambitious policies of the federal government that ushered in generations of people into the middle class were designed in ways to exclude African American communities. I don't have to educate this community about Social Security, excluding those professions that African Americans were in, that my family was in, domestics and agricultural workers, that the GI Bill had discriminatory impact, that federal housing policy, discriminatory impact and intent. My own parents, in 1969, the home I grew up in had to get white couple to pose as them just to get to the closing of our house. Over the course of my lifetime, this bias has been expressed in policies after policies that have walled off so many of our communities, where redlining took place. But perhaps in my lifetime, one of the most insidious legal uses of oppression have been seen in the system of mass incarceration and criminal justice system. Today, let's call it like it is. In this biased system, full of racial, implicit racial bias and overt racial bias, right now in America, we've come to the distraught present that there are more black men under criminal supervision in our country than all the slaves in 1850. And so where are we now? Are we beyond this? No. The rights that generations of Americans, civil rights generation before me, that they've struggled and gained ground that was covered, we are now facing the backlash that Hakeem talked about. Let's be specific. People who are being purged from voting rolls, and folks are stealing elections, as we heard from Congresswoman McBath. We have voter ID laws that are explicitly designed to suppress the vote of black Americans, Latino Americans. I was with Native American brothers and sisters in North Dakota who had laws explicitly designed to wipe them from their polls. We have in states like North Carolina congressional districts that have been gerrymandered with the sole purpose of suppressing African American votes. It's not a coincidence that the campus of a major HBCU, North Carolina A&T, has literally been split into 2 congressional districts. And we have felony disenfranchisement in this country, an explicit vestige of Jim Crow, and part of what Michelle Alexander called in her powerful book, The New Jim Crow. And we have an administration that is actively right now trying to suppress the census count in communities like Newark that are already undercounted, to try to dilute representation and power in communities of color. It is incumbent upon all of us that the people who want to help chart our path forward in the Democratic Party, that we explicitly talk about how we got here and don't engage in the kind of historical amnesia that undermines our ability to deal with this moral moment. Generations of policies based in racism and white supremacy are what got us to this point, and we should not be talking about how the next generation of policies will right the wrongs and balance the scales. We cannot deal with the past and the future by not addressing the past. And we cannot create a nation of abundant opportunity for all without making sure that we deal with the causes within the moral corruption that has undermined and challenged us since the founding of our country. Come on now, this country's founding documents, I read them all the time. The people who put those words on paper were imperfect geniuses. The Declaration of Independence refers to Native Americans as savages. Women weren't mentioned at all. Blacks are fractions of human beings. I got involved in politics in 1988, and I'll tell you right now, life is about purpose, not position. I was driven into politics, called by my community to try to make sure that we right the wrongs. And I'm going to tell you what, in Newark, Roz is showing it, Councilwoman Crump is showing it. I've learned in Newark from my neighbors and from community leaders who shaped me that we have got to get back to our country being about substance and not just sentiment. Look, I've had points in my career where I've been angry, where I've been upset. That's okay. But I was taught to turn anger into action, turn wounds into work, turn outrage, get us out working. And in Newark, that's how we have made progress together, by unifying our city, by unifying coalitions. We've been able to turn food deserts and get grocery stores into our community. Some chains that when I first talked to them laughed at me. We didn't just talk about the injustice of substandard housing. Under my leadership when I was mayor, continued under Mayor Barack, we built affordable housing, doubled the production in a housing recession. We got investments into our city when capital was not coming, and we made our communities safer and our schools better. Our city population now, after 60 years of decline, is growing, and we are the economic center of activity for our state, creating thousands of jobs for our community. We have delivered substance, not just sentiments. And look at this history now. Look at the sentiments that people use in their songs, in their pledges. We hear things like, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all are created equal. Yet we have the highest maternal mortality rates of all developed nations. We hear this liberty and justice for all, but yet we live in a nation, as Brian Stevenson says, that treats you better if you're rich and guilty than poor and innocent. We talk about being one out of many, e pluribus unum, but we have people from the highest offices in our land trying to pit folks against each other. These words cannot just be words, that we need to turn sentiment into substance, and that's the policy I want to talk to you about right now. When I got elected to the United States Senate, I was the 4th ever popularly elected African American in our country's history. But I was told by my parents, literally, that it is not enough just to have black faces in historically white places. One of the first things I did when I got there was to remark that it was one of the least diverse places I have ever seen or worked. And so I went right to work. I joined together with a friend of mine named Brian Schatz, and we said that this Senate, the staffs of senators in the Democratic Party, cannot be so undiverse. You can't have committees like the Judiciary Committee making decisions about imprisonment and liberty of African Americans and not have black people in the room when those decisions are being made. And so we went to Schumer and changed our policy. Now every single Democratic senator has to release the data of the diversity on their staff so we can see how many people of color are on their staff. Not just sentiments. I'm fighting to deliver substance. That's why I stood with Al since I have been a senator. To talk about ways that blacks have actual access to capital, to jumpstart black entrepreneurialism. Because we live in a nation right now where African Americans, when you look at the capital that flows into black entrepreneurs, just about 2% of all the venture capital money in this country go into black entrepreneurs. That's why I've worked with Al Sharpton to demand that the people who are managing the biggest pension funds in the country, Reverend Al and I have taken on this issue. When I got to Washington in 2013, I asked a simple question. Hundreds and billions of dollars of pension money being managed, and who's paying into those pensions? We are paying into those pensions. And the irony is this pension money now is being used, being invested in communities, so projects are being done that end up gentrifying our communities. And people are becoming millionaires But everybody else bring me data. I want to see the numbers. I know that the states that have diversified their pension management, guess how the women-run firms and the minority firms do? According to Barclays Bank, they do better than the firms that are majority that are managing money. We have got to start going from sentiment to substance, and one of the ways I've done that is on the small business community. I was outraged when I started looking at the racial bias in government loan programs. In Newark, Roz and I have worked for years to try to make sure black entrepreneurs from our community get access to capital. We're seeing that in our communities, these businesses that are not just firms making money, but they are pillars of our community. To make sure that black and women-owned small businesses get government contracts, get investment to capital, because black-owned businesses, we know we are all here because of the funeral home operators. We're all here because of the black barber shop. We all know that wealth is created in our communities if we are willing to seed capital there. But opportunity is not equally distributed. Only 5 metropolitan areas in America have 80% of all the VC dollars. 5 metropolitan areas. And that's why I introduced a bill and got it passed into law already, that now recently injects capital into communities that need them the most. My bill, Investing in Opportunity Act, is creating so-called opportunity zones all across our country, and has the potential and will bring billions of dollars in new investment into low-income and black and brown communities. And the evidence of that is right now, there's already an opportunity fund created for HBCUs, which will invest in the development of mixed-use properties in communities near HBCUs. These are the kind of investments that the federal government needs to be making. Under my leadership as a senator, and God willing as President of the United States, these are the kind of investments that will help to balance the scales. I stood with the great Congressman Clyburn yesterday and talked about his 10-20-30 plan and helped him to design it even better. This is to make sure that 10% of the federal funds go to communities where 20% of the population has lived under poverty for 30 years. And guess what? Those are disproportionately black and brown communities. We're in New York City. Big cities like this have entire groups of grant writers and others, but in a lot of our communities, a lot of our black and brown communities, you have part-time mayors trying to compete for federal grants with bigger communities, and they aren't able to land those dollars. Well, our legislation won't just be about sentiment, it's substantively drive more money into other places. We need to be purposely investing in the kind of things that create wealth in our community, which is why we need to expand on and pass the kind of bedrock commitments that make our country real for everyone. And that's why I want to tell you one of the policy positions that I am pushing most. And that's something to do with called baby bonds. It's a federally funded saving account for every child in America that starts at birth and then grows as they grow up. The math is very simple. My bill would roll back some of the giveaways of the Trump tax bill, put into place closed tax loopholes, and create an account for every child in America with seed capital of $1,000. And it would grow up to $2,000 for every child depending on the wealth of their family. By the age of 18, the most impoverished kids in our country would have access to upwards of $50,000 in seed capital to do things like create wealth, to pay for college, to put a down payment on a home, to jumpstart businesses. This is a policy that right here in New York, Columbia University, I think it's the only bill of its kind in Washington, they said that this bill alone would virtually close the racial wealth gap in America. So, I want to tell you why I'm getting frustrated already in this presidential campaign. Because I believe having good faith conversations about repairing for past harm in our country in the context of reparations is really important. But this conversation cannot just become a political box-checking exercise or a litmus test without meaning. The boldest policies we're talking about right now can't just be about sentiment or about acknowledging the past. They need to be about actually balancing the economic scales and confronting the bias that persists right now in the present. Because if they don't, we cannot guarantee. We may have people that speak to our issues, but we cannot guarantee that we will actually change the realities in communities like mine in Newark, New Jersey. And that's why when elected leaders stand up, they talk about real economic justice. It cannot be colorblind or race blind, because the policies that got us here were very conscious of color and in denying opportunities for African Americans. There is power in the persistent nature of racism and white supremacy in our country, and we've got to confront how that bias has been baked into our system, and most powerfully seen now in a broken criminal justice system. The old Jim Crow is now a new Jim Crow. Look, I know this because, again, I look at the data. There is no difference. As Hakeem said, this has all been fueled by the war on drugs. Don't tell me that our incarceration rates are because of some other reason. There were more marijuana arrests in 2017 than all violent crime arrests combined. The 500% increase since 1980 of our criminal justice system has been overwhelmingly because of nonviolent drug crimes. And who are we arresting? There is no difference. There is no difference in drug use or dealing drugs between blacks and whites. In fact, some studies show that white men are slightly more likely to sell drugs than blacks. The reality is there's no difference between blacks and whites for selling or using drugs, but African Americans are almost 4 times more likely to be arrested for drug crime. And a drug sentence, y'all, is a life sentence. Why? Because even when you get out of prison, here is a kid that got caught and convicted for doing things that 2 of the last 3 presidents admitted to doing. And now they can't get a job, they can't get a business license, they can't get a loan from their bank. And that's why you see me, it's hard for me to contain myself when all these folks these days are talking about legalizing marijuana, but they're not talking about expunging the records for young people who've been churned into a biased system, about taking those tax dollars that you get from marijuana and reinvesting them in the communities that have been harmed. I was literally, this is no joke, Hakeem got that bill out of the House, and over in the Senate we were battling to get the criminal justice bill. I was literally sitting next to Al Sharpton negotiating with the White House on the First Step Act. And I was battling to get this last provision in that would ban juvenile solitary confinement on the federal level. We got it in. And there were provisions in that bill that I knew I had to have in because of the impact. The crack cocaine, powder cocaine disparity, making that, like we need to do with marijuana, retroactively applied. That provision of the bill alone will affect the lives of 2,000 people, giving them pathways to liberation. And guess what? 90% of them are African American. This is substance that I delivered because I will never forget who got me into office back in 1998. But we can't stop there. That's why I introduced the Next Step Act. We need to be making serious reforms to our drug laws and sentencing guidelines and lower those mandatory minimums, or if I have my way, eliminate them. We need to fix prison conditions and make rehabilitation possible. We need to better have law enforcement training to address persistent implicit bias and have systems of accountability in policing. We need to better have re-entry into our communities. My bill to ban the box on federal jobs is critical to that. And so I want to end by saying this. We cannot allow this to be a small election. It cannot be about one person and one office. So many of the things I've talked about today, the lead in the water of millions of children in America, so many things I talked about today, working a full-time job and still being below the poverty line, so many things I talked about today, environmental injustice and Superfund sites, disproportionately in low-income communities and communities of color. These things were going on before Donald Trump was elected as President of the United States. NAM didn't start meeting as a response to one man in one office. We started this organization because of persistent injustice in our communities. And that's why I want to give a call right now to a different kind of election. Where folks who stand up before us just don't tell us what we want to hear, that we have folks that show they are committed in the substance of the policies they are putting forward. that have a record of fighting and showing us who they are. People ask me, Mildred, why do you still live in Newark, New Jersey? Why do you still live in a low-income community? You're a United States Senator. You can live anywhere because I am where I am because of communities like yours. And so I want to put a challenge to you that my older brother, the better Booker, when he was working for Lamone Owens College in Memphis, Tennessee, he took me to the Lorraine Motel. Yesterday was April 4th. The 51st year since the assassination of Martin Luther King. Reverend Jesse was there that day. Mayor Baraka and myself and Hakeem, we weren't born yet. We are the inheritors of a generation who marched for us. The one that Edmund Pettus Bridge got beaten and bled for us. We are the inheritors of a generation that just trying to register people to vote and get you killed like Goodman, Cheney, and Schwerner. From Kennedy to Medgar Evers, we are here standing on the shoulders of giants. Folks on my block don't want sentiment. They want substance. And my older brother took me to the Lorraine Motel because he didn't want to just show me the museum. He knows I know my history. He didn't just want to show me the spot where Martin Luther King. He wanted me to look down and see right there on the ground where King was slain is a block of stone with words in it. There are words from the Bible. Words from the Torah, from the Quran. They're the words that were uttered by Joseph's brothers. When they saw Joseph coming, that man with a coat of many colors, that man with a dream interpreter, and that was the moment that they took Joseph and threw him in the well to die. It's why many religious folks say sometimes you got to go to the pit before you go to the palace. Well, there's a lot of Americans feeling like they're in the pit right now. Young black men who know we're only 6% of the population, but make up the majority of the homicide victims in America. There's folks in the pit right now. People who are working that full-time job and still find themselves with more month at the end of their money than money at the end of their month. There are folks who feel like they're in the pit right now, having their addiction or their mental illness treated with jail or prison and not health care or treatment. There are folks alone and feeling like they're in the pit right now, and they're wondering what is going to become of America. Well, my brother wanted me to see that rock right there and what was written on it, because those words, when I read them, they were a challenge to my generation. Barakas to the Jeffries. A challenge to my generation. When I read those words, I got a chill, and I want to leave those words with you today as a challenge to you, as a challenge to us, as a challenge to America in this moral moment. In a nation that every generation has struggled, black folk and white folk and brown folk, from all backgrounds, who believed in the cause of our country, that the ideals of this nation, liberty and justice for all, cannot just be words. They were willing to struggle and die to make them real. This is our challenge now in the generation. What does it say right there? The words of Joseph's brothers. It says, "Behold, here cometh the dreamer. Let us slay him and see what becomes of his dream." What will happen to the dream of America on our watch? The dream of slaves for freedom, the dreams of suffragettes for equal rights in the voting ballot. What will become of the dream of our nation? The dream that everyone will be born with God's capacity and nurturing soil that will give them the opportunity to reach for their individual dream. What will become of the dream? Well, I boldly proclaim to you that it's time for my generation, it's time for us to dream again. Bold dreams and defiant dreams. It's time for us to dream again. That we can be a nation where everyone has access to health care. It's time for us to dream again. Where every child will have a great public education regardless of their zip code. It's time for us to dream again. Where everyone who works full
Thanks, Senator Booker. We have two more speakers with brief remarks we must present to you, and then the panel. Be patient, panel. We mean to do our panel. Let me make one observation. We heard so much about the candidates, their positions of substance, but after this is over, what are we going to do in our communities to prepare ourselves for the 2020 election? We next have United States Senator Jeff Merkley from Oregon. He described himself to me as a champion for justice, courageous leader, he didn't say courage, a leader and a friend of U.S. Senator Cory Booker. Here now, U.S. Senator Jeff Merkley from Oregon. Give him a hand clap of praise.
Wow. Hawking, Jeffries, Cory Booker, House and Senate. What extraordinary words, what powerful legislators, and what powerful leaders. Have another round of applause for those two individuals in our Congress. I can tell you, I'm just the humble son of a mechanic from the west coast of the United States. You know, my father had this to say about the world, that every child is beloved by God and deserves an equal opportunity to thrive in this United States of America. Every child. And that vision of opportunity, is one I have thought to honor my entire life. You know, when you come up in the blue-collar community I still live in today, it's a connection I feel with Cory. We know where we come from, we know what we fight for. It is a privilege to live on this planet, to be in this country, and to fight for that vision, that whether you're the son and daughter of a CEO, or a mill worker, or mechanic, from whatever neighborhood you come from whatever side of the railroad tracks you come, you have an equal opportunity to thrive here in the United States of America. That's what we're fighting for. But we know that's not the reality. We know about the barriers. And that was an opportunity that I had here a month ago. My daughter was celebrating her 21st birthday. We decided to go right on down with John Lewis. He invited us down to join his gathering down in Alabama to see how far we've come and to ponder how far we have to go. So we went to Birmingham. Children's Campaign of 1963. It won desegregation of public facilities and lunchroom. It was followed by a bombing campaign that included the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church, and 4 beautiful little girls died. But let's give thanks to those who fought in that children's campaign and won that battle on desegregation. And John Lewis, he took us over to Montgomery. And we stood where Rosa Parks stood as she put her first step onto that bus in 1955 to start the bus boycott that won an opportunity for people being treated equally in transportation in Montgomery in 1955. Let's celebrate that victory. And John Lewis took us down to the Legacy Museum. 816 steel coffins representing the 816 counties that we know where lynchings happened across the United States. And those 816 steel coffins are stood upright. As you enter, they're coming up off the floor. And as you walk in and get further in, they're raised up a little bit. And pretty soon, they're hanging from the ceiling. And they're a reminder of the fact that 4,400 individuals were lynched across the United States of America, and they were hanging from a rope. You go through that, and John Lewis reminded us of how far we've come, but how far we have to go. And we went down to Selma. This was my first trip to Selma. Back in 2015, the NAACP said, will you come down and help launch the Journey for Justice, a 1,000-mile walk to Washington, D.C. to fight for criminal justice reform. And that 1,000-mile walk that summer, that was a powerful walk. But the first part of the walk was the most powerful. Up over that Edmund Pettus Bridge. And now, a month ago, I was there with my daughter, and we were about to take that same walk up that ramp onto the bridge. And as we came right underneath the Edmund Pettus sign on the bridge, I felt this huge wash of emotion. My daughter turned to me and she said, what's wrong, Dad? And I said, here's what's wrong. It was back in March 7, 1965, that John Lewis, that we're with today, he was on this bridge. You can go inside the museum there in the corner, and you can see the police walking towards him. He's first in line. And then they start running towards him, and they knock him down, and they clobber him on the head, and they overwhelm the crowd, and it was Bloody Sunday. They were fighting for voting rights. And I said, next Tuesday, 2 days later, they tried again. They were confronted, and they turned back. And then 2 Sundays following that, then they launched the march a third time. And they went up over that bridge, and they kept right on going to Montgomery, and they kept right on going in the battle for voting rights, and they won that battle for voting rights in 1965. And my daughter looked at me and wondered, then why, Dad, are you so sad? Because at that moment, it just came down on me like a brick. What we have lost in the last decade. The voting rights battle we have lost in the last decade. Sometimes, most of the time, I like to believe in that vision that Martin Luther King set out, and he said that the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice. It's long, but it bends towards justice. And I think about 1870. We won for every individual of every race to have, not every individual, every man of every race, to have the right to vote. It was a big victory in 1870. 50 years later, then we had the 19th Amendment and the ability for women to vote. And then we come to the mid-60s, and we have the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. And it seems like every 50 years we're kind of leaping forward. And we come to 2008, we have the election of Barack Obama, and I stood up there behind him as a newly elected senator, looking down at the mall, looking down at the Washington Monument, the Lincoln Memorial in the distance. The mall absolutely jammed with about 10 times more people that came to Trump's inauguration. What a powerful moment, and I thought, let's keep going. Let's keep going. But here's what happened. Here's what happened. 2010, a Supreme Court, our Supreme Court said, you know what? It doesn't matter that Jefferson said you have to have distributed power or you'll never have laws that reflect the will of the people. He called it the mother principle. The Supreme Court said, we don't care about that. We're going to allow the concentration of power so that the wealthiest billionaires in the country can put hundreds of $millions into campaign. And that dark and dirty money is sweeping through our campaigns, polluting them and corrupting them. And it came from our Supreme Court, and we must stop it and end it. And then the Supreme Court weighed in 3 years later in 2013 was Shelby County, and they ripped the heart out of that 1965 Voting Rights Act. I grew up thinking of our Supreme Court as kind of wise souls, fairly adjudicating the vision of equality and opportunity in the United States of America. But you know what they're doing now? They are a fivesome that are fighting to turn our Constitution on its head. So it's no longer of by and for the people, but it's of by and for a few small people in a circle of power. How about we take our Constitution back and make it a way the people, for the people, vision once again. And it continued with March 2016, Mitch McConnell stealing a Supreme Court seat from Barack Obama. The first time in our U.S. history, the nominee hasn't been debated and voted for on even in election year. That theft was all about maintaining the corruption the Supreme Court started with Citizens United. And then the election of Donald Trump. And then the Senate Republicans changed the rule in 2017 to install Neil Gorsuch. He doesn't belong on the court because he didn't get there in a fair and just manner because it's a stolen seat. In 2018, as a result of Shelby County, we had 23 states where the election was altered by new laws restricting the opportunity to vote. And that is a dark moment for America. And it continued just 2 days ago. Mitch McConnell changed the rules by simple majority so he can pack the district courts and the circuit courts of America to continue to strengthen the power by the few and the privileged at the top. That's not the vision of our Constitution, and I want the vision for the people back, and we're going to have to fight hard together to make it happen. Gerrymandering, voter suppression, dark and dirty, Citizens United money flooding our campaigns. Our Constitution truly is turned on its head. So what are we going to do about it? Are we going to lay on our couch with a pillow over our head? As tempting as that might be. No, we're going to do this right here. National Action Network. Are you ready to act? Because if we're not going to act, we're going to get what we got in 2017. Two things. For half the year, the Republicans tried to wipe out health care for 20 to 30 million Americans. Let's not wipe out health care. Let's make it better, simple, seamless, and have health care just by living in the United States of America. And the second half was a tax bill. A tax bill that took $1.5 trillion, $2 trillion if you include interest, and gave it to the most affluent Americans. Now, anyone here like that idea? You know, I do a lot of town halls in Oregon. By the end of this year, I'll have done about 400. Nobody's ever come to a town hall and said, I got this great idea, Jeff. Let's go and rob the national treasury of $1.5 trillion and give it to the richest people. As if that's going to make America better. Because it's not. How about we get that $1.5 trillion back, or $2 trillion with interest, and invest it in healthcare and housing and education, living wage jobs for families that thrive in the United States of America. You know, President Johnson said, the vote is the most powerful instrument ever devised by man for breaking down injustice. Well, the Republicans listened, and they don't want injustice broken down. They want it built up. So we have to claim the vote. Because if you can't vote, you can't elect leaders. Leaders like Hakeem Jeffries and leaders like Cory Booker. You can't break down injustice. You can't secure laws that reflect the will of the people. Everything we care about. Taking on the predatory lending that blights our communities. Taking on mass incarceration. Taking on equality of opportunity for all, no matter who they are, who they love. Taking on the gouging of Americans with these ridiculous drug prices paid by nobody else in the developed world. Any of you ready to fight for lower drug prices? Taking on the cancer-causing drugs that are in our home products. Taking on the industrial pollution that's in our frontline communities. Taking on the lead in our water. Taking on the climate chaos that's hurting us all across America and across the world. Now, our parents and our grandparents, they waged big battles and had big victories. But we've had this decade of assault on our power to have a Biden for the people. And that's why, after we win the 2020 election, when we have a president in lawful office, someone like Cory Booker who's going to fight for the people, when we have a Senate with at least 51 votes from people who want to fight for the people, the first thing we have to do, the very first thing, is pass the For the People Act. The House has done it. The Senate has done it. If Mitch McConnell can tear down our democracy by simple majority, we can restore it by simple majority. Guaranteed early voting. Independent commissions to end gerrymandering. Restored voting for those who have served the time for their crime. And thanks to Florida for taking a big step for the people to make that happen. Automatic voter registration, same-day registration, paper ballots, polling protection, full disclosure of every campaign dollar. And when we've accomplished all that, we will have overwhelming power to do even more. And even more, how about this, the direct election of the President of the United States of America. You know, that Electoral College is a racist relic, and we should tear it down. It's full of rotten timbers, and it should stand no more. Let's replace it with a system worthy of a democratic republic, the direct election by popular vote. Martin Luther King said that human progress is neither automatic nor inevitable, that it requires the tireless exertions and passionate concerns of dedicated individuals. Now, I know the answer to the question I'm about to ask, but I'd kind of like to hear it from you all. Are you tireless? Are you passionate? Are you dedicated? Then let's go and march and fight and protest and vote and fight for other people to win these elections, so we will be able to say that we took our democracy back to make this country, our communities, our states, our country, so that every child has a full opportunity to thrive, no matter who they are or where they come from. God bless you all.